Welcome to the Introduction to ECo-PPR Household Survey Training. There are two parts to this training. In Part 1, we provided a general overview of the household survey. In this training, Part 2, we focus on administration, with activities to prepare you to administer the research tool in the field. We encourage you to use this training video in conjunction with the ECo-PPR Field Researcher Manual and the actual household survey tool as programmed in ODK. Please pause the video to make sure you have access to these resources if you haven't already. Now that you're familiar with the instructions from the training manual, here are a few tips for being an effective interviewer or enumerator. Make the respondent feel comfortable by spending time greeting and answering any questions. Reading only the question will shorten the survey time and make the survey seem more conversational. Lastly, good enumerators only visit households on the list because these households have been randomly selected to participate in the survey. Interviewing neighbors or volunteers can affect the quality of the data. You may explain briefly what you are doing to other community members or neighbors who are curious. The method for random selection of households is described in the presentation on sample selection. Now that you are familiar with the household survey tool and the protocol for administering it, consider what you should do in the following situations. First, a farmer tells you he is willing to participate, but some of his flock got sick last month and he sold all the rest. Should you interview him? Yes, continue the interview. Any household that had sheep or goats in the last 6 months is eligible, even if they currently don't have any sheep or goats. Here's the next situation. When you visit a household, you find a woman at home. She says her husband is away, but will be back tomorrow. What should you do? We should have a male and female questionnaire for this household. Interviewing the woman now and returning later when her husband is home is okay. Or we can ask her to suggest a time when both will be home and come back the following day. It may be appropriate in some contexts to call the head of household to ask for permission to interview other household members. Use your best judgment. Remember, each member of the household who is interviewed must sign a consent form. If they give oral consent, a researcher can sign for them in the space indicated on the consent form. This is the final scenario. Suppose you have finished the household survey, but the flock is out with a herder and nowhere to be seen. What do you do next? While it is best to see and examine the flock, you can complete some of the questions by asking the farmer. There is a place in the tool to indicate that the flock was not present. Now we will do some activities to get familiar with the household survey tool. While the following activities can be done alone, we strongly suggest practicing with a partner so you can get used to explaining out loud. First, open the household survey tool in ODK. As we said, if you can, practice in pairs. Introduce the project starting by approaching your partner as if you were visiting their home. Don't forget to get consent. Administer the household survey starting with section A and continue all the way through section C. Your partner will make up responses and you will fill them into the form. Pause the video and complete this activity. Here are a few considerations for questions that may be challenging. Question A6 is used for us to know whether the household should have both a male and female survey. Don't read this question out loud, but use what you have learned about the household during introductions to complete it. Unlike paper surveys, the electronic survey may skip some questions depending on the response, or only show questions if they are relevant. One example is question A7. If you are not interviewing the household head and select No, you will be prompted to enter information about the respondent you are actually speaking with. If you select Yes because you are speaking with the household head, these questions will not be visible. Remember, there are 2 enumerators visiting each household, but sections A through C are for all household members together. If there is a man and a woman to be interviewed, both enumerators will enter basic information in section A on their tablets, but only one must enter the household information in section B and C. Only skip sections B and C if you are with another enumerator who is collecting the data for the household. We will match the male and female surveys for households that have both together later using the household information in section A. Write down any other questions that came up while working through sections A, B, and C to discuss later with the group. After section C, you will split the household members into 2 groups so the woman or women can be interviewed separately from the man or men. Remember, this is to learn about different perspectives of household members because they may have different information based on their role with sheep and goats. Let's continue with the survey. Switch roles with your partner and continue to administer sections D through F of the household survey. Pause the video while you do this. Here are some special considerations for sections D through F. D2 is a good example of a question where it is important not to read the responses. Just leave the question open-ended and select the responses that fit best. You can always select Other and explain if there is no option that fits well. For question E1, write the local disease name as the respondent says it, even if it is in local language. Do not try to force it into a veterinary diagnosis. E2 is a qualitative question, so listen carefully and write the response using as much detail as possible. Some of the trading questions, such as F5, ask for a lot of detail about location. Our goal here is to understand networks and patterns of movement, so be as detailed as possible. In addition to asking about animals bought and sold, we are interested in social exchange. You can give examples of what we mean, but try not to ask leading questions. Leading questions are structured to force a certain answer. We will talk more about leading questions and qualitative data in the qualitative research training. Let's return to the survey. As always, note any questions from the previous section if you haven't already. Administer the household survey until the end with your partner. If you want to, you can change roles. In section G, we want to learn about who in the household makes decisions about certain tasks and who carries them out. It is important not to read the responses. Try to make this section conversational and it will go more quickly. Question H1, have you heard about PPR, is an example of a question that leads to skips depending on the response. Even if the respondent knows only a little about PPR, select yes. It is nice to reunite the household members before closing and ask together if there are any further questions. This is the final activity in the training. Work through the flock examination tool in ODK. Write down any questions that come up to discuss as a group. Remember, the flock examination can be administered before or after the household survey. It is done once per household with any household member. This is the end of the household survey training. As you begin training as a team, we hope you will begin using each other as resources to understand all the material. Thanks for participating, and we look forward to seeing you in the field soon.